I think looking at where we are in a clear-eyed way is a good thing. What's not good is saying, and we just have to live with it.
I think when people think of writers, or they think of artists, they think about stream of consciousness, inspiration. Kind of, it's like it just came out of me, right? And that's why I was so fascinated with what you're talking about with restraint, because I think that's the opposite of what people think when they think of art, and almost not just the opposite. Restraint feels like a bad thing. Like restraint feels like you're holding a piece of yourself back, you're censoring yourself. But actually, I'm so glad that you said that, because it is all about restraint.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, nothing comes out fully formed. I mean, this idea that poets and artists sit down and the muse or whatever the thing is that comes to you like a lightning bolt from the sky and then sort of moves through your hands, and then there's a fully formed piece of work in front of you is, if only.
Sure.
I would be
nice.
writing twice as many books if I could just sit down and sort of mainline that inspiration from the sky. But that's not what happens. What happens is a lot of mess.
Yes.
And the restraint or constraint is what I think we use to have discernment when we're going through those things and looking at a legal pad full of writing and thinking, okay, where are the gems in this mine?
Yeah.
Because not all of it is good.
Yeah.
Not all of it is, or not good. Not all of it is worthy of further exploration. Like, where are the hot spots?
Sure. Yeah, and there's restraint and then constraint, and I guess they're two sides of the same coin. But there's this Stoic named Cleanthes very early on in Stoicism, and he's saying actually the whole point of poetry, what makes poetry beautiful, he says, are the fetters. He's saying in the same way that the trumpet, it channels the air, and that's how you get the sound. And obviously we've experimented a bit more with poetry since, but the whole point is that poetry isn't whatever you want. That there's some external structure, the haiku being probably the greatest example of this, but it's in the constraints, not being able to do whatever you want. The rules are what create the meaning and the puzzle of it and the beauty. Again, you think of the artist as being this unfettered free spirit, but you actually love the rules because they are what make it a creative, like, math problem.
Yes, it's what makes it hard.
Yes.
Right? I mean, if it really was first thought, best thought.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to shape it at all, then you could just be sort of writing all the time and just sending things out into the world that were half-baked.
And everyone could do it.
And everyone could do it. And everyone can do it, right? But no, I think the poet Terence Hayes once, I think he was speaking to a room full of high school students, and someone asked him, why do you write in form? Because he writes these American sonnets. Like, why, if you can do anything you want, why would you compress into 14 lines? Why would you worry about syllable count? Why would you fence yourself in if you don't have to, if you could have the whole meadow?
Yeah.
And he said something like, it's pretty cool if you can break dance, but it's even cooler if you can break dance in a straitjacket.
Ooh, sure.
Right? So the constraint is actually forces you to be more creative.
Yeah.
If you can't use the first adjective that comes to mind because it doesn't fit the meter or it doesn't fit the syllable count or whatever it is, it forces you to do some creative problem solving while you're working. And that's the sort of math part of poetry that I find incredibly appealing, in a way I never found math itself appealing.
Sure.
But the logic of it is what's fun. The puzzle of it is what's fun.
Well, and this is the metaphor for life, too. It would be wonderful, you think, to get everything you want or to have no impediments or obstacles or difficulties. But that's the whole thing. It would also be wonderful, I guess, if it went on forever. But it's that there is a beginning and an end that creates meaning and urgency. And so the whole point is that there are rules and constraints. Now, they're more negotiable than maybe sometimes people think they are. And sometimes really transgressive, brilliant artists do great work questioning those boundaries. But in a way, they're just creating new forms and new rules and new models. And so it comes back to the same idea as you can't do whatever you want, and it's actually good that you can't do whatever you want. And even if you can do whatever you want, there's still this constraint called the audience or the attention, or is
Right.
it good or not?
Time.
Right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's all the, that's the puzzle of it. And that's where the meaning comes from.
So true.
So yeah, I think people, like, cause it was funny because you talk about constraints or restraints, and then your next chapter is on revision. And I was like looking at it and I was like, almost all your revision rules are cutting.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it's in the same way. These are like, constraints is what the medium puts on you, and then restraint is what you put on yourself. And I think every writer knows this. You go through, the publisher's like, it's good. And you're like, no, there's more I'm going to cut. Like, you're going through, and it's the process of tightening and removing anywhere you have two words that one will do. That is the ultimate restraint that and constraint that the artist puts on themselves.
I think so. And I think maybe that's, for me, coming from poetry, that kind of compression and that kind of like, what is essential here?
Yeah.
And what could I remove? If I revise, something almost always shrinks rather than grows. And I know not every writer is like that. Some writers will go back to revise a draft, whatever the genre is, whether it's a novel or a poem, and the thing will double in size. I have never been able to do that. When I revise, things get smaller because I'm always looking for what is essential, what is not, what can I get rid of, how can I trust the reader more, and like respect the reader more, and know that they're at least as savvy and as intelligent as I am, and probably more so. Mm-hmm. So what can I remove and let them sort of fill in some of those empty spaces with their own imagination and experience, and not spoon feed them?
I think it's both. Oftentimes I'm finding myself cutting, and then that's giving me the opportunity to add or articulate. So it's like, books and poetry are obviously very different, but it's like, let's say you have a 50,000 word manuscript. When you turn it in, and then you do a round of editing, it might go down to 45 and then back up to 55, but that's not the same as just adding 5,000 words, because you've compressed it. You've compressed it down. It's like you're letting it settle, and then once that compression is there, you can add on top of it.
Yeah, or you find a new idea when you're cutting things out that you then want to sort of open up another avenue and travel down that road a little ways. Yeah,
there's something satisfying too, I think, about cutting. Even though you sweated for every fucking word.
That's so true.
And had somebody else suggested you cut that earlier, you'd been like, how dare you? And now you're just like, I can't believe I cut this much today.
Yeah.
Like I both pride myself on it and take satisfaction while I'm doing it, just like how much shorter it got.
I love that too, honestly. But I also, and I don't think it's because I have a short attention span, I like shorter books.
Yes.
Like, I really like things that when I go in there, I'm like, there's no fat.
Yes.
Like, there's no connective tissue that is not required. Like, it's just muscle and bone.
Yeah.
And I know everything is there for a reason, and no one was sort of like fiddling around to get to a page count, or it just doesn't feel like there's anything extra.
Well, there's no throat clearing in poems, and that's probably what you carry over to your prose.
Yeah, throat clearing. I think that I when I'm talking to students, I'm like, okay, the first two stanzas are preamble. Yeah. Like, the poem feels like it really finds its legs and gets moving at like stanza 3. Yeah. Which is halfway through the poem. So what would happen if you cut or repurposed stanzas 1 and 2? What would happen if we just hit the ground running right away? Like, how does that feel? That's the advice I find myself giving more often than not.
Was it was Fitzgerald or Hemingway? I forget which one was talking to one, but they were like, just cut these first two. Like, you have an introductory, one of them had an introductory chapter where they were explaining who all the characters were effectively. Yeah. And he was like, just start with the characters and how much of what you do is I call it throat clearing, or it's like you're just spinning your wheels. Yeah. And just like, I get that you needed to do that until you could get traction, but me as the reader, like, start me with the traction.
Yes. Yeah. I don't need to watch you rev your engine.
Yeah, exactly.
For 40 pages. Like, once you find the road that you want to travel, then those 40 pages can either go, or if there's scenes or bits of dialogue in there that you think are solid, find a way to pull them and
Yeah.
thread them in later.
Yeah, like I often write long intros when I'm starting. Like I know some people don't do an intro, like they come back and do the intro. I know a lot of writers that do that. But I kind of need to explain to myself what I'm going to say. But almost always I come back and that introduction gets down by half because I don't need to tell you what I'm going to tell you. You know, like I've addressed this in the book, or I've not addressed the book in the book. Like I thought I needed to set this thing up.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that's not that important, or it's implied or whatever. And wherever you can, just sort of get rid of that wheel spinning, I think you're just much better. And then I think social media teaches you this too. I mean, obviously it's wicked and not great for humanity, but like when you are dealing with a medium where like on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, where it's like the first 1 second is what people are, and you go, okay, how am I translating that in my writing? Like, how am I grabbing you from the throat at the beginning? And if I'm not, that's kind of self-indulgent. And now I know I can, like, because I have to do it for these other platforms. I want the first sentence to be good, not to be like,
burying
setting
the
the
lead.
table. Yes, totally.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of, obviously you have word counts, or you have these external constraints, but ultimately you have to be the most ruthless on yourself. Like you have to be because they're going to let you get away with things, and you have to decide, hey, no, this is longer than it needs to be, or more meandering than it needs to be. Like when I'm editing my own stuff and I find myself getting a little bored, like I'm skimming, I'm like,
Okay.
that means I have to go do something. You could voice that on the audience if you wanted.
Yeah.
But you have to decide that you're not going to tolerate that.
Yeah, I think honestly it's probably the case that praise is more dangerous than criticism.
Sure.
And I think it's easy. You said people will let you get away with things. It's totally true.
Yeah.
And the more books you write, the more they will let you get away with.
Yes.
And so you really do have to be harsh on yourself.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe not harsh, but you have to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
Just in case someone else doesn't. And be really, really discerning in the way that you build things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that.
Well, I think there's a metaphor in that too, not just for people who do creative work, which is like early on you chafe under the direction or the control of an editor, and you think, hey, if I just get successful enough, if I just prove myself enough, no one can tell me what to do, which is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And then what do? You crave editorial guidance and direction. And I have actually been going back and forth with my publisher about this, is like, you guys are just rubber stamping what I'm turning in, and I know that's not good.
Yeah.
And so how now I'm like, I'm sending it back and saying, I'm putting edits on your edits, which is
Yes,
that this
but...
is insufficient. Like you didn't do, like, and actually we had a big argument about it because they sent me back a round of notes, and I was like, you're just asking me to do all the work. Like, we're partners in this thing that, like, you acquired this book, which means you have a certain amount of responsibilities, obligations to do it. And by you just saying, like, thumbs up, you're telling me that I have to go find all the things that you were supposed to find, or I have to find someone else to do it, and
or just be happy with it. Like, or you're just supposed to be like, okay,
yes,
I
exactly.
guess we're done here.
Which again, you think you want,
but you don't.
But what you actually want is great work.
Yeah.
And great work comes from the conflict and the tension and the resistance. And so, you think how many people think they want to be entrepreneurs, or they think they want to work from home, or they want their boss to be less attentive? And you do in some sense, but there's a reason that the best athletes in the world voluntarily have coaches.
Right.
It is like, and they tend, those coaches are not notoriously lax. They're usually hard asses. Like,
right.
You need the constraints, and not that you do everything that they say, but you need that thing to push against.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it keeps you honest, and it keeps you working hard. I mean, I like it when people are like, oh, I like this poem, but it feels like it's kind of following a formula that I've seen in these 2 other poems that you've written.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Like, sometimes we are too close to the work. You know, oftentimes I feel like when I'm writing, I'm painting a canvas with my nose an inch from it, and I don't always know exactly what I'm doing until I can stand back and look at it, and even then, it's mine. So how am I supposed to see it in an objective way?
Yes.
But if I can share it with a writer friend or give it to an editor who will kindly and gently be like, I like this, but
Yes.
what about X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
That gives me something to sort of chew on. That I love.
Yeah, often the question I ask is like, what didn't you like? What takes too long? What's superfluous? You know, like my questions are not like, tell me how this is great. Like, I think it's great, or I wouldn't be showing it, you know, or like I wouldn't have done it. Not that everything I do is great, but this is me doing what I think is good, or I would have not shown it to anyone.
Yeah, this is what I'm capable of.
Yes,
yeah.
at this moment.
Right.
But I want to be capable of more, and I want it to be more than it is. And that's why I am soliciting criticism primarily, not it's perfect.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you know, maybe you get it largely right on the first try, but
Not very often.
yeah, I think Hemingway said the first draft of everything is shit. And that's
It's just true.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's actually really affirming for people to hear that it doesn't matter how many books or poems or screenplays you've written, that it's always messy in the beginning and we don't really know what we're doing. And yes, we rev our engines and clear our throats and sometimes have to scrap it and start over, or pull the one juicy bit out and then build that into something new. I think that's really affirming, lest people think that you get to a certain level in your creative practice or your career and everything just flows.
Right.
I think that's a dangerous misconception to have.
Well, it's true. You can even have that misconception yourself or about yourself, which is like, I'm a big believer in like, as soon as you finish, you start the next thing.
Yeah.
Because I think the longer you let it sit, the more easy it is to get complacent, or to just not. If you get out of shape, then you have to get back into shape, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to stay. But the problem is that transition is tough because you don't finish. You spend all that time editing and refining and whatever. So you're spending, it's like 1 week you are on something that's 95% of the way there, and then the next day or week you're on something that's 0% of the way, or negative, because like you don't even have the idea yet, or you have a conception of the idea and then it immediately becomes clear that that's not the idea. And so that sort of, you can kind of get the bends there, where you're going from one environment to another, and you have to go, oh wait, this thing was at that phase at some point not that long ago. And depending on how long you've been on the project, you might have totally lost track. Maybe it might be nice on a poem is you don't work on a poem for 20 years. But I can imagine if you're like one of those, if you do those people who do those doorstop biographies, you've been working on this book for 10 years, and then you're starting with the germ of an idea for the next one. That would be so disorienting, I would think.
I think so too. I mean, although I have probably written poems over 10 years, not that I've worked on them every day for 10 years, but oftentimes I do write something and I'm like, it's not baked.
Yeah.
And I put it away and I trust future me to know what to do with it. And future me might know what to do with it in a month, or it might be 9 years later. That suddenly, I mean, I think I just finished a poem and that was in my last book, Goldenrod, from when my daughter was a baby. Wow. And she's, learning how to drive right now. And it just took me a certain amount of thinking and experience and like shifts in perception to be able to look at that problem child of a draft in a new way and have something just sort of click of what needed to happen with it.
Yeah.
I wish that happened within 3 weeks every single time, but that's just not the case.
I can just imagine you're like a business owner, a serial entrepreneur. Like you're exiting a company, or it's now self-sustaining, and it can be so easy to have forgotten what the early days of a company are like, because your company has an HR department, and you've got revenues, and you've got all these sort of established ongoing problems, and the problems of an upstart are have receded into view. And I think that's an experience you get as a writer. It's like you were just working on a project where it had all come together. Yeah. It's not perfect, but all the threads, it made sense. The journey, the concept, it came together. But it's in the early days of any project, whether it's something as short as a poem or an article or a book, where you're like, is this going to work? Is this going to be a thing? And you don't know until you've gotten most of the way there that, oh, hey, the end is in sight. I see how this all comes together. I still have to do it, but it came together.
Yeah.
And that, but sitting in the, I've just got this piles of fucking notes everywhere.
I mean, I think that uncertainty is uncomfortable. And when we make things, whether it's a piece of writing or a piece of art or a company, we are starting from scratch over and over and over again.
Yes.
And sitting in that uncertainty and not even knowing the sort of like worth or even the durability of your idea.
Yeah.
Like, is this thing actually going to get off the ground? Because I've done this before, but I haven't done this before.
Yes.
Because it's new every single time. Like, just because you've published a book or founded a company or done X, Y, or Z or raised a child doesn't mean it's going to be a piece of cake the next time you try it, because it's different every single time. That's the fun though too.
I wonder, it's like, it is interesting. Most people, like, you have your kids like somewhat close together. And then you talk to someone who they're like, I've got an 18-year-old and a 2-year-old, or they've got a 25-year-old and a 6-year-old. And you're like, oh, okay. So like part of having been all the way through it though is you do know, hey, a lot of this stuff works itself out, or you figure it out. And so it is, people go, you got to trust the process. Well, it's easier to trust a process you've been through. And so you do try to remind yourself, like on a book project, hey, there was this phase where everything was disconnected and crazy, and I didn't know if it came together, but it did. And so now I know this is part of it. I know there's the part halfway through where you doubt it. There's the part where you get towards the end where you get sick of it. There's all that. And then something like having kids or whatever, you just start the clock like 3 times within like 3 years of each other or whatever. And then so you're just in the shit for 20 years as opposed to like getting through it once, then starting again, and then starting again.
And you're like, oh, now you're ready to napalm your life again after finally sleeping through the night and they're off on their own.
Well, that's why we don't do it that way.
Exactly.
You're like, I just want to do 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 insane things close enough together that I don't second guess this insane choice that I'm
I can
making.
See the horizon.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no one else would be like, I'm going to start 5 books at the same time or within 5 years.
Not
and
ideal.
Then I'll finish them all over 20 years from now.
And then sleep through the night.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, it's brutal though. I'm going like, hey, you're coming to a close on one book, and then it's going to be shitty for a couple months or longer than where you're like just figuring it out. But it does, if you don't quit, it's never not come together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And I think, the other thing that you're sort of toggling back and forth in that moment is the going from getting something done off the ground and sort of shepherding it into the world, and then starting to make something new.
Yeah.
And making something is a very different process and sort of a different energy and emotional headspace than sharing something that you've made.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. That is very because often if you're the person who finishes something and starts something, because of also there's the delay until it comes out.
Right.
So it's like you're doing promo for something that's out, but you're 30% of the way through the next thing.
Correct.
And you have to go like, I have to talk to you about this. That was my life 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was all I'm thinking about. And now sometimes like even when I sit down and read an audiobook, I'm like, I don't remember some of this. Like this was a different life, a different me. Obviously I felt very strongly about it, but like I have to kind of get myself back in that headspace. And then people ask you very specific questions about things, and you're just like, that was like a dream.
Yeah.
And you just read a passage to me that I don't remember. I know I did. And that, to me, that's one of the also kind of evidences of I'm not like a super into it, but like the muses, I'm like, where I really am a conduit because I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even sound like me. So where did that come from?
I have found poems on my laptop before that I know are mine.
Yeah.
Like they're in Garamond, font 12. They maybe even reference something I remember happening to me or something with my kids, and I have no recollection of writing that poem.
That's surreal.
And I know no one plopped that into my MacBook.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as much as it's not a lightning bolt and things don't come out fully formed, it does oftentimes feel like walking around with an antenna raised and not quite knowing what's going to get picked up.
Yeah.
And then if you are like me and you lose a writing notebook, or you misplace a legal pad, or have a desktop that looks at all like mine, which is a disaster, you might lose something that you've drafted and then find it later and it feels strange to you.
No, you're right, because it's not lightning, but there is something fleeting and ephemeral about it, and you either grab it and build on it or you don't. Like all the thoughts that you have as you're drifting off to sleep, and there's the famous Mitch Hedberg joke about how you have to convince yourself that either you have to get out of bed and write it down, or you have to convince yourself that it's not good.
Yeah,
exactly. But like the ones that you don't do, you go, oh, this is good enough, I'll remember it in the morning, and then it's gone forever.
Poof.
There's something haunting about what all that could have been, and you either grab it and do the work, or you don't.
Right.
And if you don't, it's nothing. And if you do, it could still be nothing.
Right.
Or it could be something.
Yeah, but you have at least a shot at something. Yeah. If you capture it.
Yeah. All right, I'm sure you're sick of talking about it, but I do want to talk about Good Bones a little bit.
No, I'm not sick of talking about it.
No, it's just what I found so beautiful about the poem was this tension that I think it was relevant, that it's probably always been relevant, but the idea that like the world is shitty and awful and we have to protect our kids from it because it's not fair to dump our cynicism on them. And at the same time, it still is shitty and awful, and there's a lot of work that has to be done. And that's the sort of fundamental tension of being a good person and a good parent, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a poem that has hope in it, but not in that kind of Pollyanna way that suggests that actually, like everything's fine and everything will be okay. Yeah. Like I realize I don't think it's a very reassuring poem ultimately. But I think it's real. Yeah. And that is to say, is the world half terrible? I don't know. Some days it feels like 80% terrible.
Yeah,
I won't lie.
Yeah.
Like there are days now where I get up and read the news and half terrible, which I have gotten a lot of criticism for being that negative.
I'm nostalgic for when it was half terrible.
Thank you. Yeah. Like I look at the news now and I'm like, half terrible seems generous on a lot of days right now. But I also realize that there's so much good and so much beauty, and I don't have to look far at all to find it. And so how do we, it's the sort of, idea of negative capability. Like how do we hold those two things at the same time? Like this is a beautiful, wonderful place. It's all we have, frankly. Yeah. So even if it weren't that great, this is what you get. Yeah. So how do we deal with that reality? And then at the same time, but it's also scary and dangerous. And I don't want to lie to you about the things that are going on. When I wrote the poem, I had a toddler and like a kindergartner. Yeah. And so the idea of keeping things from my children as a parenting strategy was completely doable. Yeah. And now I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, and they're getting Apple News alerts before I get them. So there is no keeping any of this, right, from my children. Now we just have to have like age appropriate conversations about what's actually happening in the world and what we can do about it.
But you have to keep some of your feelings about it from them, right? Because you in the same like I
I'm not sure I actually do that though.
But I think to me what you're saying in the poem is like if your kid is coming to you with how terrible the world is and you're like, yes, it's even worse than right? The job of the parent is to focus on the good bones, I guess, right? Like in the way that the real estate agent is to sell the house. Like you have to sell the future to your kids, because if you don't, you're stealing something from them, right? If you're like, it is hopeless, it was good for me, but it's going to be terrible for you. Like there's a quote I like from General Mattis. He says, cynicism is cowardice.
Oh, cynicism is the worst.
Yeah. And so like, I think as a parent, you are, as a person too, you're obligated to have the courage to conceive of a future that is
Yes.
survivable at best, at worst, and improvable at best. And that's you can't steal the possibilities from your kid just because you think things are bad now.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't think you can parent without hope.
Yes.
I don't think you can create things without hope.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's possible. Can you say, okay, this is really bad and here's what's happening? Yes.
Yeah.
But you can't say, and it's never going to get any better and we're doomed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what cynicism says. Cynicism says we can't do anything about it.
Right.
I think looking at where we are in a clear-eyed way is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's not good is saying, and we just have to live with it.
Yeah.
So I guess the ship is sinking.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
We're not doing that.
And look, like we each got a childhood, right? And so your kids deserve a child. Like you
Yes.
you can't deprive them of that window where they don't know about these things. Also,
Yeah.
just because you want someone to commiserate with about
True.
these things.
I mean, although I think, growing up, I'm Gen X, growing up, the news I got was from, having the TV on in my house at 6:00.
Sure.
And it's very different now. Like
Yeah.
what our kids have access to is not even a sort of kid-friendly version of, it's not the Kids Bop version of news, right? And so it's differently challenging now.
Yeah, your home shouldn't be a bubble, but it should be some sort of respite from the storm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what family is, right?
Yeah.
Like we're in this together.
Yes.
It's not like necessarily always hospitable out there.
Yeah.
But like here, you have a soft place to land and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, or it's like, maybe you take your shoes off before you go inside, or if you've been, when I come home from the airport, I throw my clothes in the laundry. I put on clean clothes. This is, God knows what people breathed on me. I'm like, I don't want to bring the germs in here, right? And I think there's something about the shittiness of the world that we have to go out into that you have an obligation not to track onto the carpet or,
Yeah, inflict and infect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, not that you pretend it doesn't exist, but you go like, hey, this stops at the front door.
Yeah.
Because also it's not just like the events of the world, but it's like when you have a shitty day, it's easy to bring that home too.
It's true. And when they have bad days, they bring them home.
Right.
And then we say, well, maybe we should all just karaoke for half an hour and get everyone's moods up.
Yeah. Let's do something.
Let's do something.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting too? I was thinking about, like, when you think about cynicism, right? It's like there is something profoundly hopeful in the statement of like it's good bones, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a group of people like that. I mean, you think about how much work it was as a society to say like, hey, this house is in a state of disrepair, but something historically significant happened here, and we're not going to let you turn it into a gas station.
Right.
Right. Like or
just tear it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. There's a group of people who don't believe in such a thing, and they would say that they're not hopeful. They would say this is progress, but it's not progress. Mm-hmm. Tearing everything down is not always progress. Sometimes you get, NIMBYism, which is anti-progress and not good. But the idea of like, hey, no, there's something worth preserving here. There is goodness in this thing. We can't just burn everything down or bulldoze everything.
Right.
That there's something profoundly important about that too.
Yeah. We don't actually get to start from scratch.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yes.
It is when you write something.
Yes.
It's not in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think about, whenever somebody invents a totally new way of doing things, like this is where I'm reimagining this institution or this world, like revolutions tend to be bad because they think they can reimagine everything.
Right.
And it's like, if you'd accepted there was some, to go to your metaphor, the crooked timbers of humanity are not perfect, but they're there.
Right.
And you ignore them at your peril, or you attempt to bulldoze them at your peril. And we have to go, hey, look, there's a lot of shittiness, and when we're left to do this or that, we do bad things. but I do believe in people, or I do believe in society, or I believe in this country. And I think we can, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's not a shithole, but, it can be better.
There are things worth fighting for.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that, even from a parenting perspective, is a really powerful thing to share with your kids.
Totally.
Like, things aren't always easy, things aren't always great, but here are the things that are worth fighting for. What do you think is worth fighting for? What matters to you? What are you going to do about it?
Well, yeah, if cynicism is cowardice, then there's something quite courageous about earnestness and sincerity.
And caring is courageous.
Yes.
And vulnerable. And like maybe uncool in those ways. Like, cynicism is cool.
Yes.
Being earnest and sincere and
cringe.
caring about things is, I'm so cringe.
Yes.
Like, whenever I'm like taking pictures of clouds and my kids are like, you're such a poet. I'm like, or using my Merlin bird app because I want to know what that bird is, It's, like being enthusiastic really about anything and being invested is deeply uncool. And I'm so on board for all of that.
Yeah, no, it's like, hey, this matters. And your cynicism or your scorn for it, it's not just disrespectful, but it's dangerous because you're like,
and lazy.
Yeah, because what you're proposing is a kind of nihilism where it's like everyone does whatever they want or nothing matters, or like, why are you taking this so seriously?
Yeah.
Like, there is this weird dynamic now where, like, acting like things matter, or that people have dignity, or that there are some things that you don't do or say, makes you this, like, I don't know, like, conservative in the other sense, like,
right.
or just unfun, or uncool. I just don't know. Like, one of my favorite articles of all time is, and just the headline is good. It's like, I don't know how to explain to you that you have to care about other people. And it's like that, but there's something cringe about that, apparently, to some people.
Like, empathy is a problem now? I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I deeply do not get it.
And or just the, like, hey, I'm not saying that's illegal, but it's wrong. Or that we shouldn't do things that way. It's just, that's just not what a good person would do. And then there, like, on both sides, you have, I don't mean this politically, but there's the people who are like, well, how can you prove that it's wrong? Like, where you kind of philosophically slice and dice it to a kind of nihilism.
Yeah.
And then there's just the avarice and nihilism of just like, well, this is good for me, so I don't care.
That.
And they both get us to the same place where, lol, nothing matters.
The result is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I am determined to keep caring, despite it being deeply uncool and very cringe. Yeah,
because we know what happens when
we stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there is, the artist who goes, no, but this poem matters. And it's like, you have to believe that.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe it, you get to a bad, like, you think about who thought these things didn't matter and where the dark places that those societies ended up very quickly.
Yes. History teaches us these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why we shouldn't bulldoze it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I want to go back to restraint too, because there's another thing. I read this article, I think Patty Davis wrote in the New York Times. She's Ronald Reagan's daughter. And she was talking about, like, we think of memoir as like, you say everything you think and everything that ever happened to you. And she was just talking about how that even in this genre, restraint is important because your words have impact on other people.
Sure. Right?
And so, again, I think sometimes people think that courage for the artist is just saying whatever you think. And there is something maybe dashing and bold again about that, but there's also something maybe cruel about it too. And so you don't want to be someone who's pulling your punches, but at the same time, how do you think about how your work lands for and on other people?
Yeah. I mean, that's just responsibility, right?
Yes.
That's just being a good person.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I think when you're writing, the writer can't always win. I guess is one way to put it, right? So I'm a writer, but I'm a human first.
Yeah.
I'm not a writer first and then a human.
Yeah.
And so the human being in me has to be part of the editorial process and part of the shaping process. And so, when I was working on my memoir, a lot of what I was doing was thinking about boundary setting and like what I wanted to say, what I didn't want to say. And most of that had nothing to do with me. It had to do with how to protect other people in my life who aren't explicitly consenting to having me write about my life with them as characters in it.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do we, without pulling punches, show up in an honest and vulnerable and transparent way while also not just handing it all to other people, which I think would feel bad in one's body too. Yeah. And so for me, I knew that the first sentence of my memoir would have something in it that would say this is not a tell-all.
Right.
In part because in thinking about it, I realized they don't exist. And so every book that is marketed as a tell-all isn't that.
Sure.
Because you only
something
have your...
was left out.
Something. Well, but it's also just your perspective.
Sure.
If you're writing a tell-all memoir...
It's tell-all from my perspective.
From your perspective, maybe, but probably not.
Sure.
Right? It's however many words it is, it's not your whole life.
Yeah, sure.
So it's not a tell-all even from your perspective. It's certainly not a tell-all of the situation.
Yeah.
It's a very narrow view of a certain time in your life told from the perspective of your consciousness at the time that you were writing the book.
Yeah.
And so the narrator of my memoir is Maggie Smith.
Yeah.
But I left her in the book.
Right.
She lives in that book because I'm not exactly that person anymore. And if I were writing that memoir today, it would be a different book.
Yeah, and it's not illegal. I mean, obviously there are legal things. Sometimes you can't say this, or you have to, change this or that. But like, there's just this decision to say, hey, I'm not comfortable doing this to this person, or they don't deserve that. There is this, again, we think of justice too often as a black and white thing, and not just a, hey, what am I comfortable with? What feels right and responsible here? And that the artist's obligation isn't solely to truth. There are things, and I think about this now, even with platforms and stuff, where like your job isn't just to get an audience or just to do what will do well, but to do what feels true to you and what is responsible in some way to the medium and to society. Yeah,
and you can do all of those things at the same time.
Well, that's the puzzle of it, is figuring out how to do it. And that means not doing some things that other people are doing or that would be financially remunerative.
Yes.
Or fun or easy, and to go, hey, I'm not gonna platform this person, or I'm gonna have to go out of my way to really explain why that I'm doing this or that, because there's a responsibility. Like there I think in the way that company, like CEOs go, oh, my obligation is to the shareholders, or to the share price as a way of excusing morally reprehensible things.
Yep.
I think a lot of artists, and then more sort of the more modern entrepreneurial artists, just goes like, well, it's doing well.
Right.
People are interested. Like a lot of people I know that have podcasts are going, well, my audience is interested in hearing about this. And that's how they sort of, they rationalize talking to a person.
Yeah.
And instead of, going, hey, is the impact of talking to this person more negative than positive?
Right. Yeah. I mean, would saying a lot of inflammatory things in a book sell more books? Sure.
Yeah.
If that's the sole goal, to sell a bunch of books, then everybody would just be sort of like setting fires.
Well, and if the sole goal was just to make money, why do a book at all? There's so many things that make so much more money.
Right.
Like.
Yeah. I know. I mean,
yes.
I know personally, like, I don't really know that many poets who got into writing because they thought it would be incredibly lucrative.
Yes, right. You fucked up if that's why you got into poetry.
Really, I know. It's amazing. It's amazing that after studying creative writing, women's studies, and philosophy in college, that I'm not living in my parents' basement right now. So none of this was supposed to be a money-making endeavor.
Yeah.
But I think that's right. I mean, so many people ask, like, how do I write the thing I can't bear to write?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have this story to tell, but I don't know how to tell it because it's going to upset my mother, or I'm going to have to finally tell this story about this thing that happened to me when I was a kid. How do we responsibly, like ethically,
sure,
and also take care of ourselves in the process? Because there is a difference between writing a story and then living in the world with the story.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful to think, as you're deciding how to tell the story you want to tell, to imagine yourself a couple of years out on book tour or on a podcast or giving a talk or running into somebody at the farmer's market who has read that book or running into your child's teacher who has read that book. And what stories are you thinking about telling that maybe you would tell differently if you knew you had to take that show on the road? Because you will have to take that show on the road.
Right.
And so how does it feel in your body to think about having those conversations or with people in your life who are in that book?
Yeah.
And so no, your obligation is not solely to your publisher or the readers or the audience or however you conceive of it. I think when you're making things, your first responsibility is to yourself and your own sense of right and wrong, and also to the people in your life, because you are a human being first.
Yeah, and there's something earnest and almost self-important about going, no, what I'm doing matters, and that there's an ethical implication for the decision I'm making. But it's true, and when you don't think that, you get this sort of nihilistic exhibitionist art that might be titillating and exciting or even invigorating to do. But there's something kind of empty about it because you're just talking shit about people or you're just exposing things, and what you're not doing is the real weight of exploring it and talking about it, and then also thinking about how it's going to land and what it's going to mean to people. And if also this question of like, hey, if everyone did what I'm about to do, what would that world look like?
Actually, that's a really funny way to think about it.
Like, how would I feel if someone was doing, I mean, it's also just the golden rule, but like if
shoe
someone
on the
did
other
this to
foot.
me.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, radical empathy, right? Like how do I sort of share my truth, but also treat the story with the care it deserves? Because I'm a person and we're all people and we're all messy and fallible, and none of us is doing a perfect job at any of this. I mean, one of the things, I think Gina Frangella said this about memoir, that it needs 2 ingredients: self-assessment and societal interrogation. Yeah. And so if you think about it that way, to sort of write what you would conceive of as a tell-all and sort of just dump everything and likely, I think, in that, make others the villains and yourself the hero of your own story. Yeah. It's a really dangerous stance and probably is going to miss at least one of those 2 pieces. Yeah.
No, I found this because, I write a lot about history and these long dead historical figures. So you can kind of reduce them to these caricatures. These are their motivations. These are who they were. You can be very judgmental because not only are they dead, but all their relatives are dead. And
no one's coming for you.
Yeah. And every once in a while I'll talk about, a more modern figure. It was weird to write, like I wrote about Michael Jordan in one of my books and this sort of endless competitive desire and how kind of toxic that was. And then I met his son, and then you're like, oh, okay, he's not reading. Here's a person who's reading this about someone they like and know, right? And so it changed how I think about it when I write about people who are alive. And I think I've gotten better at it. Just I now go out of my way to talk to people that know them or read sympathetic takes and just trying to sort of round out the picture, but also to think, hey, this Roman emperor or this, general or whomever from a long time ago, they probably didn't think they were a piece of shit. Like,
I feel like most people don't think that,
right,
right?
right. So
some people are wrong.
Yeah, of course, of course, and what they did can still be objectively reprehensible.
Bad, yeah.
But there was clearly something that they thought that so what is that? And so the curiosity of like, well, how did they think about it, and how did they square this? That becomes you have to have the curiosity. And if you have it, it becomes much more interesting because they're not evil person doing evil thing. They're a normal person thinking they're doing a good thing that in fact is evil.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah. But I mean, I think that is part of just taking people in as humans, right? And thinking like, oh, you who are doing something reprehensible, and it would be easy for me to make you into a caricature.
Yes.
You are someone's child.
Yeah.
Like you grew up as someone's child.
Sure.
You are perhaps someone's spouse or someone's parent or someone's fun uncle.
Yes.
And so how do I not excuse any of sort of who you are to me and what you're doing and what the impact is, but also refuse to flatten you into just like a bumper sticker
Totally.
for this sort of a bad infomercial for what you're doing.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, hard sometimes, but I think necessary because we're people.
Well, and that's the job of the artist. There's this crazy interview where James Baldwin is talking about like these Southern sheriffs, and he's like, I'm sure this guy, after a long day of work, he gets a beer out of the fridge, he kisses his wife, and he's thinking about him as this human being, and he's trying, how does that human being then stick another human being with a cattle prod?
Right.
And it's that was kind of the brilliance of the civil rights movement, which is you have this structure and this system that is profoundly unjust and evil. And these people who had no reason to do the empathetic work of figuring out why this was being done to them. Like the black leaders who go, well, why is the sheriff operating this way? And what conscience does he have that we could appeal to? What makes a group of people come to a school and yell at little children trying to, like, what is that? And what redeemable parts are in them? And how can we hit them there? That is, I think, art on a fundamental level, that empathy and just getting to the basis of the human experience, and then being able to either, whether it's a political campaign or a slogan or a speech or a stunt that is designed for the TV cameras, to hit at that's the art. That's, Kafka said that art is supposed to be an axe that breaks this frozen sea. That's also what great activism and political oratory does, is it doesn't assume that the ice is unbreakable.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us need to be sort of held by the shoulders and kind of shaken awake.
Yes.
And that's something that art can do, which is why it's important. I mean, sometimes it feels, times like these, but I say times like these, but times have always been like these in one way, shape, or form for
Probably
someone.
Worse. What's another time you would rather be alive that's objectively better?
Right. And I think, if a different time felt better to me, that's probably a mark of privilege on my part.
It would be better for you, but not everyone.
Not everyone else, right? So I keep thinking in times like these, but no, in all times, in all harrowing times, because all times have been harrowing in some way for someone, art matters. And yet sometimes it feels like playing with blocks. Yeah. Because it's just like, it's not a tourniquet. Yeah. Right? It's not, I'm not an ACLU lawyer. Yeah. I'm not a surgeon. I don't have the ability to sort of make large scale decisions that would positively impact people in the ways that I feel frustrated that I'm not able to do. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm writing poems, or I'm, working on a new book, or I'm giving talks or teaching. And sometimes it feels like not quite enough. And it's helpful to remember that sort of frozen sea. Yes. And that kind of wake up that a lot of people need. And maybe it's incremental, but I think it matters.
It does matter. It matters a lot. And it's funny how we hold people who are, we have no compunction about or doubt that there are people who are making things worse.
Yeah.
Right. And that the people who go along with it or cheer for it, that they're helping make it worse. And then when we decide, first off, not to join the mob, right? One of the early Stoics said the whole point of being a philosopher is to not be part of the mob, like to just think for things yourself. When we do that, we go, but we shrug that off as nothing. Like first, like we know, so if what they're doing is making the problem worse, then not participating it is not being part of the jeering mob that's doing bad shit is itself a positive thing.
Yeah.
And then, speaking out, doing whatever your thing is well, if you're going to hold these people morally culpable over here, you have to morally credit yourself for these seemingly infinitesimal or inconsequential contributions. It matters too. And then, it obviously it's a spectrum. There's more you can do. And it can make a difference. Like, and art historically has made an enormous difference. It just feels, I think we're too quick. There's a cynical element of us that's too quick to dismiss these things as inconsequential or meaningless, and they're not.
No, not at all. I mean, art has saved my life 1,000 times over. And I know that's true for a lot of people. Sure. I mean, and also, I don't know what the point is of saving a world in which art is not a part of it.
Also true. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's not the same as being an ACLU lawyer, but and so there is some self-importance that can come in where you make yourself seem like you're doing the Lord's work when really you're not. But I don't know. There's something like the great man of history theory is not, a lot of people don't, give it much credence these days, but it's like, we definitely see where not so great people made history really bad.
Yeah.
And then we're like, but there's nothing an individual can do. It's like, well, if they can make it worse, seems like a person can make it better.
I agree with that.
And so I think there's something hopeful in not just thinking that a person could make it better, but then like you could be that person
instead of waiting on someone else to do it for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, these big movements, they do start, somewhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a poem.
Sometimes.
Or perhaps the poem encourages someone who does the thing to not give up.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, especially with Good Bones. I have a kind of a strange relationship with that poem because it does get shared when things are particularly terrible.
It's like that Mr. Rogers quote about helpers.
Yeah.
Where it just enters the viral commons.
Yes, exactly. So, it feels like public domain work to me now. It almost feels like it's not my personal work anymore. But it's also, whenever I see it a lot, it's during times when people feel like they need to acknowledge darkness but look for light. And so I hear all the time that poem or I hear from people about the memoir that it helped get them through a really rough patch in their life. And it is sort of affirming to think that something that you brought forth from yourself and from your own struggles or experience or even pain might be helpful to somebody else.
Yeah, and you would probably, I'm guessing, trade if you said, hey, would you like your poem to become irrelevant? Be like, awesome, sure, right? Like, it would be great.
We never needed it again.
Yeah, I would love to find out that the need for Stoicism has disappeared and my niche has been rendered obsolete by progress and innovation. I don't think that's happening.
Yeah, I'd write about anything. I mean, it's funny, after my memoir came out, like more than one person would say something like, well, at least you got a book out of it.
Yeah.
Like, wow, you really made lemonade from those lemons. And I just thought, like, I'm a writer. Yeah. I'll write anything. Yeah. Like, if it hadn't been that book, I would have written another book about something else. Like, I don't actually need grief or loss
Joan Didion did not need her husband and daughter to
Daughter.
die.
No,
She would have
didn't.
written a couple other good books.
And I would have loved them, right?
Yes.
Like the material is everywhere. It doesn't need to be that hard.
Yes.
So yes, I would absolutely trade art made from painful experiences, because I wouldn't be trading away my art. I would be trading away my material for other material.
Well, you also wouldn't be trading away painful experiences, because you just have.
I'd have other ones.
Yeah, you just have other ones, and they're all equally pain. That is the thing. That is our superpower as humans, is we can feel everything intensely, and so this is what allows us to survive horrible things, and also to make not so horrible things feel like the world is ending.
Yeah.
And it's like you're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
People have been getting through stuff like this for a long time.
Yeah. Life is long, actually.
Yeah.
In some ways.
So you don't like writing routines?
I don't.
Why?
Well, because they don't work for me. So I don't not like them for others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're the kind of person who can sit down at the same time every day. I mean, I have friends who do this. I have friends who sit down at the same time every day in the same chair. Sometimes they wear the same color. Like I know people who like routine, and I think whatever works for you works for you. For me, what I would like to do is reassure people that if they're not the kind of person who has a routine or who can manage a routine because of life circumstances, that does not mean you're not a real writer and can't get a lot done.
Yeah.
Writing routines have not worked for me, mostly because of raising kids, and being a primary caregiver and now a solo caregiver. And so, no, I can't say at this time of day, every day I'm going to be doing this, because I might be at the pediatrician.
Right.
Or I might be walking my dog, or I might get invited to do something, to give a talk, and I really would like to do that. My life is very kind of haphazard right now. And so the writing is catch as catch can. And frankly, writing with, a newborn and a toddler taught me to write on scraps with scraps whenever I could, whether it was late at night or during a nap, or, on the back of a check, or, while waiting in the carpool line. And I don't know, I think there are probably people out there who can find a little time here and there, but maybe feel like they're not doing it for real. There are air quotes there. Because they're not the kind of person who has a writing room and a writing schedule. And I just want to tell people it's okay, you're still doing it.
Well, that's a routine also. Like Susan Straight, the novelist, who's my professor in college, she talks about this in her memoir. She would put her kids in the stroller and walk them till they fell asleep, because they always fall asleep in it. They take their nap in the move. And then as soon as they fell asleep, she would stop and sit down and write in a notebook, like on the curb. And it's like, that's a writing routine.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's a discipline. And in fact, that's more discipline than I wake up at 6 and I make coffee and then I do yoga and then I meditate for 6 hours. You do it within like poetry.
It's constraints,
it's
exactly.
You find the parts you control inside all that you don't control, and you create a discipline and a practice or a ritual that allows you to sort of do the thing.
Yeah.
Just obviously there's some that are more inspiring and beautiful. Although I would argue there's something actually much more inspiring and disciplined about I squeeze the writing in between naps.
Yep.
Or, Toni Morrison being like, no, I get all my writing done before I hear the word mom. Like that's cooler in a way. It's not as celebrated, but it's cooler than I use this old typewriter. There's something kind of luxurious and signaling about the more elaborate routines.
Yeah. And frankly, growing up and being a young writer, a lot of the elaborate routines that I was hearing about were men's elaborate routines. And it was probably because they were able to be in that writing room for 5 hours because their spouse took care of the children.
Yeah, right.
So I just thought, if you're a writer and you're self-employed and you're a single parent, what does your writing routine look like?
Yes.
And it looks a lot less like a writing routine and a lot more like carving out as much time for it, but and sort of like carving around
Well, I say you should have routines, plural. Like,
Yeah.
this is what you do when they wake up at this time. This is what you do when this happens first. Like, you have to, because the rigidity can become a kind of inflexibility or necessitating a certain amount of privilege and certainty
Yeah.
that life is just not going to offer. And also, a lot of these older ones, it was predicated on an environment where, like, there was a small group of working writers and everyone else was on the outside desperate to get in, or it was a totally uncommercial enterprise. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes people go, what would the ancient Stoics think about, you, I don't know, like selling ads or like the commerce element. And I go, well, look, if I had an estate tended by slaves, in a
Right.
giant hegemonic empire, maybe I wouldn't be thinking about being directly compensated for my work, but that's not the economics that we live in. Thankfully, like,
Yeah.
this is actually a much pure and less exploitative system than it was for, even these like poets or whoever in the Renaissance. Like, they got all their money from the Pope, who stole it from other people. Like, it wasn't such a pure
patronage
system.
has its issues too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just because they could be removed from society, doesn't it, it makes it actually less impressive.
Yeah.
Like,
it wasn't cleaner.
yes, it wasn't cleaner, but it's less relatable and in some ways involved less discipline. Like, to make it work in being a functioning member of society, or like knowing the names of your children and the names of your children's teachers, is like, that's a responsibility that writers even a generation and a half ago didn't have.
Right.
And so it's more impressive if you can manage to do it and not be, what they call an art monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not be an art monster. If you can break dance in a straitjacket.
Totally.
Better.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, there's a lot of people who've done incredible things, and what did they trade to be able to do that? It's like, oh no, this person's an NBA champion and a good hang.
Right.
Like, oh wow, like,
Yeah.
that's actually, they did two hard things.
Let's not trade our humanity away for our art.
Yes.
Or our jobs or whatever those things are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the success come at the expense of, being at all normal?
Right.
It's kind of impressive if you can be pretty good at what you do and pretty normal.
Yeah. And say, actually, no, I can't do that literary festival because it's my kid's last day of school and they always have a little picnic that I'd like to attend.
Yes.
I mean, these are the compromises that we make. It can't be all or nothing.
Yeah. There's a story about Danielle de Prima, and she's at this party with the Beats, and she says she has to leave.
Oh, Diane.
Yes, Diane.
Yeah.
Did I say it wrong?
Danielle.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's supposed to leave, and she goes, I got to go relieve my babysitter. And Kerouac says, if you go pick up your kid, you'll never make it as a writer. And she says, if I don't pick up my kid, I'll never make it as a writer.
Yeah.
And her point was that this is a discipline too. Like, that, hey, I said I'd be home at 11. That's a routine too.
Yes.
Not just the, hey, I'm J.D. Salinger and I have a separate life in a bunker behind the house and I'm neglecting my other responsibilities as a person, as a parent, as a decent human. And in the rare cases where someone can do both, or is doing one and earnestly trying to do the other two, that to me is like just an even narrower target.
Yeah.
Or more elite company.
Yeah. Like I can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
But I sure try.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not using my work as an excuse to not have to try.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, been the domain of most of the great male artists in history.
I think it helps that I write so much about my domestic life.
Yeah,
like my kids
sure.
are so much a part of my work and also my community and my neighbors and my friends. And so when people ask me to do things and I'm not able because of family obligations,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if you're asking me because you like what I do and
Yeah.
what I do, this is it.
Yes.
Like, it's not an act. Like,
you
this
want
really
me-
is my life.
Would you rather I come and be a hypocrite or not come and show that I meant this thing that means something to you?
Shall I walk the walk? Because
Yeah.
that's what I'm really trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is part of the art too, I think.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's just words and you don't mean them, or you're not, as we all fall short, you're not trying to mean them.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That would be odd and inauthentic. And,
But don't you think that's probably more the rule than the exception?
oh, I hope not.
I don't mean now. I just mean I like with a lot of the people that we hold up.
Perhaps. I mean, what do they say? Don't meet your heroes, right? Because what if this person, you've been reading their work for years and you think they're one way, and then you meet them and they're rude to you? Or, I mean, I feel very lucky that my experience with most writers that at least I've met has been incredibly positive, and most people are maybe even better than what you think they are from reading their work.
Yeah, it's like how many great men, women, artists of history would you want to have been married to or raised by?
Probably
right?
very few.
Yeah, right.
But I'm independent.
Yeah. I'm just saying, it's like, you know, it's like, so there, and I think when you learn those things, it does reflect on the work. You go, oh, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah.
And just like, look, presidents used to be able to have lots of affairs and everyone sort of didn't detract from the thing. And now I think it's progress. We go like, don't be so much of a piece of shit.
Yeah. It's funny when I meet people and they're like, oh, you're so friendly. You're just like I thought you would be. And then I think, well, what would it have been like if I hadn't been? Like, what a weird thing to think that you know someone, because that happens, right? Like when you put books into the world and then you meet someone who's read your books, there's like an immediate, like asymmetrical intimacy that is happening because they know a lot about you and you know nothing probably about them.
But just like the point about as you become more successful as a writer, you know, you get more latitude from your editors or from the industry. I think you also sense when you become a kind of a public figure or a success, you have an audience of people, you go, oh, there are fewer constraints on me now. Like I could get away with more. And that is a weird thing to realize. And it's also weird to realize some people go, well, I'm going to do that then.
Yeah.
You know, like the idea that success exempts you or lessens the standards, I think it's the wrong lesson to take. It's like, no. Actually, now it's a harder thing because no one's making me and they will make allowances for me, in fact. And so it's like, yeah, when you're doing a talk, you go something like, oh my God, you hear later, or they say, you were so nice, you're not what I expected. You go, oh, so I could have been a dick? Like, and that you guys just would have, I could have asked for more things.
Yeah, I could have phoned this in.
I could have been late and you guys would have just figured it out.
Right. That's
weird. And there are, I think, people who go, oh yeah, I just don't have to be on time anymore. Right. And that's not a healthy thing, but it's timeless. I mean, that's what's so, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is so fascinating because here you have this guy fundamentally exempted now from all the rules of society.
Yeah.
And he writes this book to himself where he's like, no, here's all the things here's the standards you're going to try to hold yourself to. And I'm going to hold you accountable when you don't. But that's when it becomes a voluntary thing, it, I think, becomes more meaningful.
Absolutely. But also you have to live with yourself.
Sure.
So, I mean, I can't imagine what it would feel like in my body to show up late. It would feel bad.
But I think, do you think the people that are doing it, do you think it feels like anything at all to them?
I don't know.
I bet you become desensitized. I bet it's less of a day-to-day wrestling and choice and more like a choice you make and then it kind of takes care of itself.
You're like, that's just what I do now. That's who I am now.
Yeah.
I'm late guy.
Or it's on time when I get there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's a kind of a
We're on my schedule now.
Yeah, it's a more where you just it's a self-centeredness that metastasizes. That I think everyone like not just everyone has, but I would argue you inherently have as some kind of artist because there's some thirst for attention or recognition or desire to be seen, or else you probably would been drawn to accounting instead of writing. So it's there, and then it can be metastasized by the radiation that's being
blast it at you.
Yes.
Yeah. My joke is that I became a writer because I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
And if you write long enough and get enough of a readership, then you have to sort of put your introvert away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And start extroverting.
Yes.
Yes. But if one could just write books in a cabin forever, I feel like I would sign up for that.
Yeah.
That's not how the world works.
No, definitely not.
At all.
No, you get asked. I say like the reward for succeeding as a writer is less time for writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have, that's again where that is back to the discipline, because doing the other things often pays more.
Yeah.
And it's more immediately validating.
Yeah.
And it's easier.
Yeah.
Even if you're an introvert, I'd rather give a talk than write a fucking book. Like it's not so.
I'd rather write a book.
No, I just mean like the talk takes an hour.
That's true.
Right? Like it's a immediately simpler thing. And
time wise.
So if there, yes, as much as you love what you do, there's also the resistance and procrastination that wants to not do the thing.
Yeah.
You can find yourself with a lot of very good excuses to not have to do it.
100%. And good excuses that are also the way that you are supporting yourself and your family,
Totally.
right? And so to be able to look at some of those things and say, okay, I actually I have to have some restraint here, right? And say, I have to say no.
Yes.
Which I love to say yes. I'm really good at saying yes. I'm Midwestern.
Yeah.
Like I'm early and I love to say yes. And having to say no is difficult for me. And it's something I'm learning to do because I realize that saying no to that is saying yes to the other thing that I'm tacitly saying no to every time I say yes to these other things. So if I'm saying no to this, so I'm saying yes to my children, or I'm saying no to this because I'm saying yes to working on this book.
Yeah.
And I can't be out flying around everywhere while I'm doing it.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be rude.
Yeah.
And so you say yes. And then there's something powerful about having kids, because then when that crying 6-year-old is, you're talking to them on the phone and they're asking where you are, or they're, I thought we were doing this or whatever, or the thing, you're late because you said you would, you couldn't extricate yourself from a conversation that you didn't want to be rude.
Yeah.
You were rude. You were rude to a person that is feeling it much more deeply than this complete stranger. And you're also being rude to yourself. And if you love what you do and you love that person that gets to do the main thing that you do, like, why are you treating that person shitty by stealing all their time?
These are the things.
Well, you got a second to go look at some books?
Yeah.
Let's do it.